Hi everyone, my name is Nayana and welcome back to my channel. So today we have a video which has been highly requested for a long time now, as in a long time. I'm very sorry that it didn't happen before. In this video, we're gonna be showing you how we managed a budget trip to Europe for over 2 weeks. So I wish I could take the whole credit for it, but the whole planning process, except for some parts of it, was done by Sooraj. So, Sooraj,
You talk too much. Alright, let's do this. So I'm going to assume that you already are thinking of going to Europe because that's where most of my knowledge comes in as far as planning this trip goes. We decided to go to Europe because we thought it would be a good place to explore for our honeymoon. What also became apparent pretty quickly is that we needed to do this on a budget. So I'll basically be taking you through the steps that we went through to kind of plan a 17-day trip on a budget. So the first thing that you need to know when you are planning a trip is, I know all of you won't have this option, but flexibility is your best friend. So if you have some sort of flexibility with regards to your personal situation, with your work life and all that, to be able to decide what time of year or when you can travel, that goes a long way towards helping you get some value for money out of your trip. We got married in December, but we decided we'll go around April because any time before that Europe will be a little cold, and Nayana is not a fan of the cold at all. So that's why we considered going around April, and the month of April was what we targeted. The next thing you need to do is ideally book as far in advance as you can. This is a good rule of thumb to follow. So we actually booked our tickets a full 6 months before we flew. Now, how do you find the best fare once you have decided to go to Europe? So the thing about Europe is the visa that you will be getting is usually a Schengen visa, which covers 26 countries in that region. So the advantage of the Schengen visa is you can kind of go through 26 countries without any further restrictions. Now that allows you to be a little flexible in terms of which your port of entry into Europe is. I recommend a couple of apps like Skyscanner, and then there's Kiwi. There's also the service called Hopper. These websites are laid out pretty well. You can quickly find your way around them and use all the services they have. Try and figure out what an average fare from your chosen origin point to across Europe is. And these websites generally show you ticket prices to different cities. So you can see which is the best city that you can directly fly to. And round trips are generally the cheapest way to get your flight tickets. So this means that you will have to eventually come back to the same city you started off in. And for us, it just so happened that the cheapest city to fly to in Europe happened to be Rome. On the 3rd of October, while I was checking out these dates on Kiwi, I realized that for a 17-day period, we got a pretty lucrative flight fare, which came to, I think, a little over 55,000 rupees for the both of us to and fro. So once we had that zeroed in, we didn't really wait for anything else. We just went for it. The airline that we found this fare on was Kuwait Airways. That is how our first part of the trip was done. The next thing is, how do you go about filing this visa application? Now, it's a relatively simple process. There is a body called VFS which handles the visa process for the Schengen area. And they have a website which gives you a pretty clear information guide on what you need, what are the documents and all that. So I won't go into detail, but I'll just go over some of the things that you need to kind of keep in mind. When you're applying for a visa, generally you have to apply to the country that you will be flying into or you'll be spending the most amount of time in during your trip. So there you have to kind of show that government, that country's government, that you have enough money to go and come back. A good rule of thumb is have at least over a lakh in your bank account and just leave it there for at least 3 months, because when you are applying for your visa, they'll ask for your bank statements as well. And when they see that you have this money in your account, then they are far more likely to grant you a visa because they know that you're financially stable and can go and come back. If you have credit cards, you can show those as well, because then they know that you can of course swipe your card and then come back. But ideally have some money parked in your account for a while before you go. So the other thing that you require as part of your visa application is travel insurance. Now this covers a few things: hospitalization, loss of luggage, so on and so forth. And we highly recommend getting it as well, because if you have seen Nayana's previous Europe vlogs, then you will understand how it came in handy for us. If you haven't seen that video, there will be a card up above. Go click and watch that video as well. But bottom line being, get travel insurance and get it from a good company. The last part of your visa process is obviously going to the VFS office and submitting your documents. Now, this is also the reason why I say ideally go and have this appointment sorted out as soon as your visa process opens, that 3-month window opens, because in case there is any issue with any discrepancy with your documents, it gives you some time. Generally, your visa application will not take very long. I think we got ours within 10 days, but you don't want to leave everything to chance for the last minute. So my advice is sort it out as quickly as possible. Those were some of the important things that you need for a visa, but generally for a Schengen visa, they also want to know what your entire itinerary is. Now, if you, like we did, booked 6 months in advance and visa applications only open 3 months before your trip, that gives you some time to do your research and get your bookings all sorted, which is the next point that I kind of wanted to talk about, which is planning. Planning is basically everything. So what I was trying to do is not leave anything till the point that we reach Italy. If there was a booking or a reservation or anything at all that I could sort out, pay for from the comfort of my home, after researching all the possibilities, I took care of it. So that after getting there, there wasn't much left for me to do except for day-to-day expenses and all that. So I would highly recommend, if you are on a budget, to do that. Another thing that works in your favor here, and this is again an advantage of booking in advance, they have dynamic pricing on trains, basically like what you see in flights in India and everything, where if you book early, you get a much cheaper fare. So slightly longer journeys, we managed to get into the superfast trains just because we booked pretty much as soon as the bookings opened and we got really good fares. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Ticket reservation is one thing. You also need to know where you're going in the first place, right? Now for that, there's no substitute to research. You need to look at the country that you're going to, you need to read up about it, you need to understand where you want to go. And once you've kind of figured out like some popular locations, Google Maps is your best friend. You can quickly check out how far it is, how you can string your trip together. Does it make sense to go from A to B and then to C or go directly? So Google Maps is a great companion for this part of your planning. The other options that you have when you're going around Europe is either you can take a bus. So there are a few providers like Eurolines and Flixbus. And then there's also low-cost airlines that you can use. Low-cost airlines in Europe can be ridiculously cheap. There are some catches that come with this. One of which is that they will restrict how much luggage you can carry. Of course, this is alright if you are just traveling light and you just have a backpack and you're just taking it into your cabin luggage, that's fine. But if you have extra luggage, you really want to plan ahead and see if you can pack light, which was not very easy for me to do because I had Nayana with me. So the good thing is that a lot of airports generally have a luggage holding facility. So if you are kind of coming back to where you started off with, you can just leave the luggage at the airport and then fly on these low cost flights, come back, pick up your luggage and then move on. So that kind of brings me to another point that you need to keep in mind when you're planning your budget trip. That is, irrespective of how much of a budget you're on, always leave a little extra at the end because things like this can happen. So we ended up missing our flight. We had to get back to Milan city. Then we had to take one of these buses. It did cost us a little more money than we originally had set aside. So it's always best to keep a little money aside in case things don't go exactly according to plan. Alright, so now I think you would have a basic idea about how you can plan travel in Europe. Now the next thing is accommodation. One, of course, you have hotels, but that is hardly ever the most budget option. Then there are hostels. Hostels can be good depending on like your travel situation, because a lot of hostels give you accommodation with a lot of other people, so you can mingle, you can get to meet a lot of travelers. Then there's also couchsurfing, which we considered trying out, but then there was, again, you have to pay upfront at the couchsurfing website before you can then start matching with people who may be willing to give you a place to sleep. What we eventually ended up doing was going with Airbnb. Airbnbs are often available at comparable rates to hostels. Just that you will have a little more privacy, and you get to meet people even there. Like, you normally have great hosts that you can talk to. Basically, it helps you travel like a local. And that is kind of why we ended up choosing Airbnbs pretty much throughout our stay. The hack that I used to convince her to take a particular place that I liked is mostly if they have pets, Nayana says yes. So we ended up staying in a few places that had dogs and cats, and it was generally a lot of fun, and you've probably seen some of that in her previous videos as well. Now, that average cost per night is something that you want to keep an eye on when you're doing your bookings across your trip, because sometimes that can go up a little bit, but then you can always try and compensate for that somewhere else. Now, in our case, our average cost per night was around rupees 3,000. In the case of Venice, where we stayed, it went up to nearly 5,000. But there were other days when it was closer to 1,700, which is, I think, a fair deal. The other thing is that you need to have foreign currency, obviously. But if you're doing a Europe trip, you can gently be assured that the currency that you will be dealing with is the euro. So then it makes sense to kind of have enough with you, but you don't want to carry it around as cash. This is where getting a Forex card is usually helpful. Now, we personally used a service called Book My Forex, which gave us pretty good exchange rates. Now, I would advise that if you have an account with the bank already, first check with them if they offer you a Forex card, because then it becomes a lot easier to top it up while you're on the go in case you need to. When you're using a third-party service, you may get a better rate to begin with, but the top-up process can be a lot more cumbersome, and we did face a few issues because of that, because we needed money urgently and the topping up process was taking a little time. No matter how much planning you do beforehand, you might still need to adjust a few things on the fly. So for that, one thing that you probably should invest in before you go is an international data plan. You can either speak to your service provider and ask them to enable a plan that allows you to use data on the go, or you can get a separate SIM which shouldn't be too expensive. So this is a huge life changer, because if you want to suddenly look up something while you're outside, if you want to find a restaurant or an attraction, this comes in really handy. Alright, so now we've got most of the bases covered. We've got our ticket sorted. Hopefully your visa application is now on its way. Travel and accommodation is fine. But you also need to figure out where you want to go and what you want to see. Some of the major attractions in Europe tend to have an entry fee. So if you're sure that you want to see some attractions, I'd highly recommend just book the tickets early on and have those sorted. So that sorts out most of the tough stuff that you need to plan in advance. But there is also one major part of the entire Euro trip experience that you can't do a lot about planning in advance, which is basically your day-to-day stuff that you do there. On the financial side, I would recommend allocating a reasonable amount for this. Again, that amount that we talked about earlier that you had staying in your bank, don't use it off once you've got your visa. Keep it. You will need it on this trip. Now again, one thing that you can do is basically try and cut down on food expenses, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't experience the food of the country. Of course, go out, explore, check out the cuisine of the country that you're visiting. The other thing to cut down on costs is if you are staying in an Airbnb, some Airbnbs may provide you with a basic breakfast. Load up on that and then go out so that you don't get hungry very quickly. The other option is some of them also have kitchens. So what you can do is you can head out in the evening, find a local supermarket, pick up some basic supplies, even if it's bread and eggs, come back and then spend a little time making yourself a meal that you can then put in a lunch box or a tiffin box. We can just take a seat somewhere in a park and then just have a meal. Doing that every now and then also helps you save up some money to splurge on some of the fancier eateries or like bars or pubs or somewhere that you may want to visit. So yeah, that's pretty much how we planned our entire Europe trip. I hope you have fun planning your own trip and many adventures to follow.
Okay, so I hope all of you guys got a good piece of information about the whole planning to Europe and how we made it happen. So, well, he's the one who planned the whole thing, and well, I did plan here and there. He hasn't mentioned that, but I have to accept that he's the one who planned the majority of the whole thing, which made sure that we could do it on a very tight budget. So that's about it for this whole planning thing.
I hope I've conveyed all the information that was required, and I hope this helps out some of you in some way. If so, then I've done my job and it was all worth it.
Alright, so I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that this video was helpful to you if you are planning a journey to Europe anytime. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you know what to do. Give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel for more such videos. So I'll see you again next time with another video. So till then, bye bye.